People are suffering.
Shut it down! Shut it down!
Protesters gathered outside an immigration and customs enforcement facility in Broadview, Illinois. Protesters clashed with police and chanted slogans such as "Shut it down" and "Immigrants are welcome here," in opposition to immigration policies. Police, armed with batons, pushed back demonstrators attempting to block the facility's entrance, arresting several. Activists ignored warnings to stay off the roadway, with some donning tear gas masks and raising fists in defiance. Law enforcement officers monitored the protest from rooftops and nearby areas as demonstrators booed vehicles arriving at the facility.
People are suffering. People are afraid. People are being dragged out of their houses and their cars. They're afraid to go to work. They're afraid to take their kids to school. And it's because of what our government's doing. So as a citizen of this country, I don't feel like I have a whole lot of choice but to speak up.
I've been an activist since Trump's first regime, and I am somebody who, I have to use my white privilege. I know people don't like that phrase, white privilege, and they think that means when you say you have white privilege, like I grew up with a, silver or a Trump gold spoon in my mouth, but I did not. But white privilege means my life is not made harder by the color of my skin. And so if I get to the front of the line, like I would go to George Floyd marches, if I get to the front of the line and I am face to face with law enforcement, they're not grabbing me. But if a person of color is at the front, they're going to grab them. So I'm there to try and be that first line.
4 weeks into President Donald Trump's Operation Midway Blitz deportation drive, mass arrests across Chicago, which have swept up parents on their way to school and entire families, have induced fear in immigrant communities, according to city leaders and immigration advocates. Some 500 National Guard troops began deploying near Chicago on Wednesday under orders from Trump. The Department of Homeland Security said it has arrested 1,000 people in the Chicago area since September 8th, when the deportation push began.
Earlier today, the state of Illinois filed a lawsuit challenging Donald Trump's unlawful and unwarranted plans to deploy armed military troops to Chicago. There is no invasion here. There is no insurrection here. And local and state law enforcement are on the job and managing what they need to. Without my permission and against my vigorous objections, the president has federalized 300 Illinois National Guard military troops and hundreds of National Guard members from Texas, and he has ordered them to activate for duty in Illinois. I have called upon Governor Abbott to immediately withdraw his support for this decision and refuse to allow Texas National Guard members to be used in this way. Let me be clear. Donald Trump is using our service members as political props and as pawns in his illegal effort to militarize our nation's cities. I want to thank Attorney General Kwame Raoul and his staff, along with my general counsel, Ann Spillane, and our excellent governor's office legal team for working tirelessly for weeks now to prepare federal lawsuits in anticipation of this unconstitutional invasion of Illinois by the federal government. For weeks now, Donald Trump, Kristi Noem, and Gregory Bovino have brought their militarized CBP and ICE agents to the streets of Chicago to cause violence and chaos in this city. They need to stop inciting our city's residents. Since the beginning of this invasion, families have been snatched up off the streets or removed from their homes, zip-tied and detained for hours, including especially U.S. citizens and legal residents of our state. And in the words of CBP Chief Patrol Agent Greg Bovino, they're being chosen by how they look. Peaceful protesters have been hit with tear gas and shot with rubber bullets. Journalists simply reporting the facts on the ground have been targeted and arrested. The facts on the ground have been targeted and arrested. U.S. citizens, including children, have been traumatized and detained. This escalation of violence is targeted and intentional and premeditated. The Trump administration is following a playbook: cause chaos, create fear and confusion, make it seem like peaceful protesters are a mob by firing gas pellets and tear gas canisters at them. Why? To create the pretext for invoking the Insurrection Act so that he can send military troops to our city. He wants to justify and normalize the presence of armed soldiers under his direct command. I want to take you through the steps that he's taken to follow the playbook and show how it is playing out real time here in Illinois. When I first heard reports of Trump's plan to send armed military troops into our streets, more than 100 elected officials, business leaders, clergy, law enforcement, educators, and community organizations gathered on August 25th to send an unequivocal message to Donald Trump. We don't want troops on the streets of Chicago. There was never an insurrection or an invasion on the ground that justified the deployment of the military to our American city. We stood out there on a beautiful day at River Point Park to make that point. Donald Trump's deranged depiction of Chicago as a hellhole, a war zone, and the worst and most dangerous city in the world was just complete BS. He clearly has decided to declare war on a great American city that has the lowest homicide rate in 60 years, in a state that has record employment and near record tourism. And he's done it for some unspoken reason. I spent the days and weeks following that out and about in our communities, in Bronzeville, in Austin, in Little Village, Berwyn, South Shore, and others, walking and talking and listening to real Chicagoans and local business owners, something Donald Trump, Greg Bovino, Tom Homan, and Kristi Noem have never bothered to do. No insurrections, no invasions. The folks in the neighborhoods do not want armed troops marching in their streets. When it comes to public safety, they want civilian law enforcement when they need them, and jobs, and after-school programs for kids in the neighborhoods. They do not want Donald Trump to occupy their communities. Then the Trump invasion began. Since ICE and CBP announced their operations on September 8th, our people have been subjected to violence, intimidation, and harassment.